Hi there, Ronnie again, Amber's Night, coming at you with another video. And this is a video about my worst experiences as a GM, and by do I have a few, so I'll be brief on each of them. One of them wasn't so much worse, just, just annoying and frustrating. I was doing a Dungeons and Dragons game, and it was a standard dungeon crawl. And I was setting it up for a sort of big finish. So there was a small antechamber before this huge main room where there was going to be a fairly pitched battle for these two players that were there. Now the two players had arrived on rocks, great eagles. And I really didn't want to have a small pitch battle in an ante-room before this big battle in the main room. And I wanted to keep something going. So I set a puzzle for them. I had the usual, you can get through if you answer a puzzle. Voice, big mouth at the wall thing. And I thought this will be a puzzle they'll solve in seconds and we can get on with it. So I asked my players, what kind of stone flies? Obviously it was a play on words. The answer was rock, which I figured they would get given that they'd flown in on them. Half an hour. 30 odd minutes it took them to come up with the answer. It was interesting only in watching the thought process of these characters going on. And when they finally hit upon the fact that it was rock, I mean, the face palming was almost hilarious. I had almost lost interest in getting the main fight going because I was just sitting there going, God, this is so easy. So that was one. But that was more frustrating than bad. I have seen some really bad players though in things. I'll get back to the bad players. The second GMing one was a game of Dark Conspiracy. I decided to go with an old stalwart of a ghost town. So I had them all on a Greyhound bus that got lost or derailed due to a dark elf influencing the driver to make certain lane changes. And he arrived in an old western ghost town, and the whole place was haunted, deserted, haunted. And the bus passengers were being massacred left, right and centre. I did a very specific one which had two of them inside a haunted barber shop being slashed and ripped to ruins, which the players kind of went ugh at. And they ended up holding themselves up in the saloon. And I set it up again for a big finish. And that big finish being that all the dead from the nearby graveyard were going to rise and there would be a big shootout. So I'm setting out and setting it up, and the dead rose, and they came down the main street. And one of my players, Scott, there's your shout out, he produced a law rocket from his equipment list. Now, I had completely missed it. And I couldn't suddenly turn back and say, no, you're not allowed that. Because I had looked at it, I looked at his equipment list, and it was there, I missed it, and I okayed his equipment list, so I couldn't go back on it. So that killed that scenario pretty much stone dead, literally. One law rocket later, and the zombies were pretty much decimated, and they quickly rounded up the rest. So what had intended to be a big finish had fallen by the wayside. But as a GM, my biggest problem has been players. Two players I can name, well I won't name, but two players. One player in particular has time and again thwarted my games. We were playing Castle Falkenstein, and he was playing a mage, a sorcerer, and they were in the south of Prussia, in a small village, and they were trying to get about 100 miles north to go to Poland and into Warsaw. And there were zombies. There was a huge zombie army moving from the east that was going to take over the whole of the west. They were up against this necromancer, and the necromancer's headquarters at that point were in Warsaw. So this magician says to the rest of the players, the sorcerer says to the rest of the players, look, I can teleport you there. Now they all know how pernickety magic can be in this world, and they all went, no, you're not doing that. All of them, all the players said it. So while they're shooting, firing, blasting, punching, kicking, stabbing the zombies, fending them off, the sorcerer decides he's going to do the spell anyway. And it's one of those situations where you know it's not going to end well, but there's nothing you can do about it as a GM, because it's, you know, at some point free will has to take over. But then he made a critical mistake. The Castle Wolkenstein uses playing cards, and if when you're doing magic you add energy, depending on the card you play. If you play a Joker, however, the spell immediately fires, and it fires excessively. And I thought, right, I'll teach you a lesson. And he transported not only himself, not only his players, but the entire village into the middle of Warsaw. Massive destruction occurred, and one of the NPCs that they were protecting ended up in a vat of wine, just because of the position of where he was and where the vat was at the time. That character didn't survive that scenario. The players actually shot him. And it's not the first time that that particular player stroke GM has created problems. I did run a game of Dungeons and Dragons many years ago where one particular character was on a voyage, and his sort of immediate superior decided he was going to show up his knife throwing act. And again, you're left with that position of what can you do, especially when the player decides that the last knife he's actually going to aim properly for the character. Luckily I got round that, but it does create problems. The other one was a game of Cult. I decided to do a one-night game. It was a one-night intro game. So I decided to put them on a cruise to the Caribbean, and they were going to be hit by zombies. You notice a theme running through some of my games here. I don't use zombies that often. It's just, you know, silly things tend to happen. Now this guy, to his credit, had never played a role-playing game before. However, they were all creating their characters together, and he was paying no attention whatsoever. He wasn't interested. He wanted to play, but he didn't want to make a character up. So I'm trying to get him involved, because rather than have them all as disparate strangers to each other, I wanted them all as a party. Saves a lot of time because it was a one-night game. So he finally got there, and he put in a whole load of stupid shit on his character sheet, lots of jokes and so on, because he couldn't, as far as he was concerned, he only had two modes. It was either really, really serious and involved, or jokey. He had no in between, which was a pain. Then during the game, he was actually, at that time, involved with one of the other players. Now, she was quite happy to play. She wanted to play. The other two players wanted to play. Now, they were a couple as well, but they were playing. This guy, I won't name him, but this guy, having none of it. He was too busy trying to snuggle up to and kiss and cuddle and basically annoy the hell out of his girlfriend rather than actually playing the game. He didn't survive the scenario. Now this is not because I made things tough for him. I tend to sometimes err on the side of players to keep the game flowing. I simply didn't with him. Bad of me? Yeah. Necessary, unfortunately, because the quicker he got killed off, the better, because it allowed the other three to actually play. Suffice it to say, I've never really invited him into another game. So, very few times I've actually had a really bad gaming experience as a GM. In the same way, I've rarely had good, exceptional gaming. Most of them have been fairly or fairly but nothing in the extremes. I try to keep a tight ship, whilst at the same time being a very light touch. It takes work. So yes, that's my sort of worst experiences as a GM. And next I'm going to talk about my best and worst experiences as a player.